video for this week. And this week we are doing, the big one, at least when it comes to German Expressionism, it is rather the big one. We are doing Robert Wiene's The Cabinet of Dr Caligari. So that's what we're looking at this week. Her ladyship is definitely going to be here next week. I know she's been promising, but we've been busy. But before we get on with that, remember, if you want to support us, there is our shop where we have books and writing services. There is also our Redbubble shop where we have over 100 designs, a whole load of them silent film Buster Keaton related. So if you are interested in that, check those out. Like, subscribe, comment, and share is another way to support these videos. So, it was only a matter of time before I got to Caligari. I've actually wanted to do this for a bit, because it is such an interesting film, and there's only so far you can go into German Expressionist film without talking about this film. It's also like super, super, super iconic. It's a 1920 film. It is seen as the birth of the horror film. It's also the birth of the German Expressionist cinema style. And like a lot of things, it kind of happened accidentally. So, looking at this film is quite peculiar. It doesn't really matter whether you know the plot, because in some ways it's not about the plot, because the plot can get a bit nuts after a point. It is kind of literally nuts. So we start out the film in a park where a man is finishing telling a story and a younger man is starting one. And he says, he notices a woman walking along the path and says that that's his sweetheart, but she just walks past him completely oblivious. And he tells this story. And so instantly we go from this, sort of shabby looking little park with a wall to a completely drawn world. The entire world, the background behind is the first image of this story. And he tells this story of a fair in the town where he was, and that a very strange man, the mysterious Dr. Caligari, turns up to the fair with his very, very odd exhibit. His exhibit is a somnambulist called Caesar. And this somnambulist, he appears to have power over. So Caesar has spent his 23 years mostly asleep, but Caligari has learnt how to wake Caesar. So mostly he appears to be just this sideshow exhibit of this young man who sleeps. Our protagonist, our storyteller, it has a friend, and his friend and he go to see Caligari. Now, Caligari, there are weird things that happen once Caligari arrives in town. The town clerk, who is rude to him when he comes to get his permit for exhibiting, is mysteriously murdered. We don't see the murder, we just see shadows, but we know he's been murdered. So that's the start That's before we get there to the sideshow. At the sideshow, Caesar wakes, which is, I think, probably, aside from a little bit later, probably one of the most iconic images of the film. I'll put it in here. So Caesar waking is one of the most iconic images. Caesar wakes, and his trick is to predict the future. The narrator's friend, Alan, asks Caesar, "How long will I live?" And Caesar replies, "Until dawn," which Alan is quite aghast at this. After the sideshow, they go home, Alan and the narrator, and on their way home, they meet up with the woman that we saw at the beginning. She is the beloved of both of them. They both like her. They both love her. But they promise each other they will not, after meeting her and flirting with her, they both promise, we will not get in each other. We won't be rivals for her. We won't let this spoil our friendship. That night, Alan is murdered in his bed, but we don't see who it is. We just see shadows. The next morning, word comes to the narrator that Alan has been murdered. The narrator then goes round to his place, sees all the uncut, all the mess, goes to the police, and there is it becomes a bit of a, okay, well, what happened? Let's try and find out what happened. There has also been another murder. An old woman was killed, and the police capture him. There's Alan's funeral, and at some point, the woman is worried about the narrator, and she actually goes looking for him because the police have searched Caligari's caravan, and there's this really quite interesting moment of having Caesar fast asleep, sitting up being fed, and then he puts him back in his box. So assures, oh no, he's in his box and he's asleep. He is asleep. There is no, he's not awake. Caligari does end up waking Caesar when the girl comes by that evening, and Caesar looks at her. She doesn't ask him anything, but it rather creeps her out. Actually, her reaction, there is a moment where Caesar and Caligari look at each other like, what's up with her? But that night, after the narrator has been messing about with the police and trying to find out what's happened, the man who killed the woman wasn't the murderer of either the clerk or Alan. He was a thief who was trying to use that as cover to kill someone himself. So he isn't the murderer. And that night, we see Caesar is awake. And not only is Caesar awake, Caesar comes into the girl's room with the intent to kill her. But whereas he's killed men, the sleeping girl provokes a different sort of response from him, and he kidnaps her. And that gives us our other really famous image, which is Caesar carrying the unconscious girl up the rooftops. So Caesar runs off with her, but it turns out that 23 years and waking very, very seldomly, he doesn't have a great deal of stamina. He drops her, and then he dies of exhaustion. Caligari, the police come again and discover that there is a dummy in the box, and Caligari legs it. And he legs it into an insane asylum. Our narrator follows him in, and we find out that he is the director of the insane asylum, and he has become obsessed with this story of Caligari and his sleeping murderer. And when a somnambulant patient arrives, he decides to use this person for his own ends. And the staff discover this. The dead somnambulant is found in the fields. They assume he has escaped the asylum, and he's brought in, and then the doctor is taken and put into a cell. That is the end of the narrator's narrative. But it's not the end of the film. Because what we then see is that the narrator and the man he's been speaking with are in the asylum. And his beloved is another patient at the asylum. Moreover, Caesar, far from being the psychotic somnambulant killer, is also a patient at the asylum. And having told his story, and then he sees the director of the asylum, Dr. Caligari. And he reacts with fury about this. And we discover he is also a patient in the asylum, as he is taken to a cell. And the Dr. Caligari says, "Now I know how to treat you." It's a weird, spirally, not necessarily entirely logical story. It is a story of madness. And it does have, I think, it depends on how you interpret the ending, depends on whether or not the asylum director is a malevolent or a benefic force. So it is quite open. But what makes this such an iconic story? Because it's got a pretty flimsy plot. Why is this the birthplace of German Expressionist film? This was a film that came about via more or less accident. The script was written with a particular intention, and that particular intention of the author was about mental illness and his own struggles with doctors around his mental health and whether or not he would be exempted from service in the First World War. The director, Robert Vine, was a director, had never directed anything that looked like this. Like, never. Nothing had ever looked like this. This was purely his first German Expressionist film, and he had directed just straight sort of films. So it wasn't that the director had this vision. The designs of the set are really interesting because they are painted. On the whole, they are painted. There is this real unreality. You know when you are stepping into a story being told. And then you know when you are stepping out of the story being told. And it has to do in part with the way that the characters' faces are painted. Because when you watch the film, you realize some characters have their faces painted heavily and some characters do not. Some characters look like regular people out of a silent film, not the heavily stylized makeup. So it was an accident, and it is like the OG German Expressionist film, because narrative-wise, it's kind of flimsy, but symbolically, and the way that you can read this film is really rich. So the idea of a killer sleepwalker under control of a nefarious doctor is really quite nightmarishy sort of stuff. And I think Conrad Veidt, who plays Caesar, I think he actually only has about 7 minutes of screen time, but every single second he is on the screen, you are watching that man. He is a magnetic performance. He's very tall, he's very slender. This gives a very apparition-like quality to Caesar. He is entirely dressed in black with some highlights painted on it. His face is very starkly painted. So this central image is the thing that most people remember from the film. That's not to say that this is the only performance that is good. The performances are very good. It's not that there is like one weak performance in there. But when it comes to interpreting this thing, it's kind of like watching a David Lynch. How I interpret this is not going to be the same way you interpret this. And nobody's wrong. Nobody is wrong, because that's the nature of German Expressionism. That's the nature of abstract film. You can't really be wrong with something that has a nebulous meaning. So, much like Nosferatu, this is not just about what it's about. It has an element of the supernatural in it. I would say most of the German Expressionist films have some supernatural quality to them, but it's not an essential quality. We will have a look later at The Hands of Orlak, which is another one that I really enjoyed. That's less supernatural and more kind of freaky body horror. But while there is that supernatural element, we also have to remember that the supernatural element in this film is imposed by the narrator, not by the reality. So, what is the story about? I think that what you have to do is look at whose face is painted and whose is not. I think that the narrator is feeling guilty about the death of his friend. Now, I think that there are multiple ways that you can read it in terms of why he is feeling guilty about the death of his friend. But there is the love rival. There is the proximity to the war, obviously. The war looms large over just about everything created at in this period. It's huge, especially German expressionist film. As I said, this is Germans having nightmares on celluloid, even if they didn't realize that's what they were doing. They're having nightmares on celluloid. So they're processing the trauma of the war. So the way I interpret it is People whose faces are painted are people he has put into the story to expiate his own feelings of guilt, to displace his own feelings of guilt onto something or someone else. However, people whose faces are not painted are people who are real, and people who what happens to them actually happened to them. Not necessarily in the way he's describing, but this actually happened to them. So the police chief, his face is not painted. The doctor, his face is not painted. The narrator's is. So he is constructing a new identity for himself through this face paint. Alan, most importantly, has not got a painted face. I think that the narrator persuaded his friend to join up, and he was killed. Why did he persuade him to join up? Because they were both in love with the same woman. And the reason the police chief and the doctor are not, the doctor who is the girl's father, are not painted either, is because they're the ones who got him committed to the asylum. All the other characters represent something. The girl is not the real girl. She is just someone who he has seen and he has put in that place. It may not have been over a girl. It may have been his friend, because his friend is, oh, let's go see this sideshow. Is the sideshow the war? So is the war, is that this ominous thing that comes into this town and starts killing people? So his friend is killed by the sideshow. He is killed by the war. The guilt that the narrator has is, did he encourage him? Did he encourage him to sign up? And now he is having to deal with the fact that his friend died partly because of his own actions. What's Caesar then? And what is Caligari? Caligari can be seen as the old men, the people in charge, the powerful. He's the head of the asylum, after all, the powerful men who start the war. Caesar then becomes all the innocent men who had to fight it and who were turned into murderers, who were turned into killers. But it's not them. It's not their nature. Caesar is not actually a killer. He would never have become a killer had he not fallen into the hands of the old men in power. The old man in power is the one who's directing the killing by saying, this person, this person. So that is who I think Caesar is. Caesar is the young men who join up and go to war. And the girl he kidnaps, they're the collateral damage of the civilians. She is not a combatant. There is no real reason to harm her. She's not actually come for the trick of the sideshow, and yet she gets caught up in this. She is not she doesn't initially go to the sideshow. The men meet her on their way home. And then there is the thief who is profiting from what is already happening. in the world, this chaos, this malignant force that's been brought into their lives, to create his own drama and chaos and use that cover of violence. The black marketeers, the people who will use the fact that it is unusual times to then engage in criminal activity. So it is that's what I think it is. And that's why he has taken people from the asylum and cast them in these more symbolic roles to help him process the guilt that he feels over his complicity in his friend's death. He has, it has to be this and it has to be that. They're not, if they're painted faces, they're not real people. This didn't really happen. And I think that's why the doctor at the end says, now I know how I can cure you, because he can understand what it is. It's not actually, has nothing to do with Caligari. Caligari is a red herring. It is about the death of Alan. So that's how I interpret it. That's how I interpret it. Much like a David Lynch, there isn't a wrong answer. There's just how you watch it. So if you have a different interpretation, please share, because it's always an interesting discussion. So this was not a film that intentionally set off to become the first of a type. It was just supposed to be a film. It just happened to be a very unusual film. But it is the beginning of the horror genre, because it has a really, quite a creepy quality to it. It is creepy, the idea of this somnambulist who wakes up randomly and kills people under the power of a despotic overlord. This person could have been controlled like that, because ultimately Caesar is an innocent person who also suffers. Caesar is not necessarily responsible for what is happening, and he dies. He dies too, mostly because he's exhaustion. He just sort of keels over. But it was not an intentionally made film. What it did do is, it's like the OG version. Every other German Expressionist film is trying to capture the same quality and not quite getting there, because it wasn't intentional. So how do you, if it sort of happened by accident, so there are elements but an attempt to actually replicate the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari doesn't happen. Genuine, it attempts to use similar sorts of sets. It does use the sorts of sets, and From Morn Till Midnight both use the aesthetic qualities, but they don't have quite the same nightmare feel that the Cabinet manages to produce. There are all the other examples have much more, shall we say, coherent plots. So something like Orlak has a much more coherent plot. Waxworks is a little bit closer, and that is, that has that has some interesting elements to it, which we'll have a look at. The Student of Prague is a very straight story with German Expressionist elements, Metropolis, Nosferatu. There are a lot of them that have elements. Nothing else quite gets the immediacy and the just pure nightmare quality that this film manages. I would say most of the best German Expressionist films involve Conrad Veidt. That just seems to be a particular thing. His style of acting, his look, his way of engaging with the material seems to really work with this style of film. And he's there at the beginning with these. But at the same time, he's also like anyone from that period, worked a ton. There are completely straight roles. Not everything is like weird kooky villain, though weird kooky villain is kind of some of the best stuff. But it is if it's your introduction to German Expressionist film, which it generally is for a lot of people, unless they've gone the Nosferatu route, then it can feel a bit disappointing that there is nothing else like it. This is why it's so influential, is because it is unique. Elements of it have been reused, aspects of it have been reused. It has massively influenced film. The horror genre would not look the same without this film. German Expressionism would not exist without this film. Film noir would probably not exist without this film. So it is absolutely massively important. Do have a look. As I said, the German watch it with the German intertitles. You'll need to put subtitles on if you don't speak German. But this has a huge amount of text. It's kind of strange going from something like Buster Keaton, where he tried to condense down the text as to as little as possible, to something like Caligari, which is giving you like paragraphs, and the scriptwriter was clearly trying to express something in a silent mode that it's almost like it wasn't necessarily equipped to express what he was wanting to express, because a lot of the intertitles are a narrator explaining things, so presumably the narrator explaining what is happening as he's telling this story. But because this is film and the visuals of this film are so incredibly striking, what you find is that the visuals of the film and the narrative of the film are telling two different stories, which is part of the reason why it is so open to interpretation. As I said, it's my interpretation of this film, not the interpretation of this film. There is no the interpretation of this film. It is, and always will be, something that is open to debate and discussion, and that's what makes it so great. So I hope you enjoy this. I hope you do enjoy this film. It's probably one of those ones that you're either going to really like it or you're not. It'll bug you, because it I would say if you're someone who's on the, oh yes, I like David Lynch and then like talking about that to my friends for ages, you'll love this. If you're, I want a closed narrative, I want a closed circuit, I want to understand no, you're just not going to like it. I try it by all means. It's only an hour and a bit. It's not long at all. But you're probably not going to like it. if you want it to be. But what is it about? If you are the kind of person who is interpreting Nosferatu as this is literally happening and I'm calling this an adaptation, a weird adaptation of Dracula, you probably won't like this one. But if you are more open to this is a film and I'm going to interpret the moving image as primary and the text as secondary, that is, I think, the best way to look at this. The intertitles are quite beautiful. There's just so much text. It's really unusual to see that for a silent film. There's a lot of reading involved in this one. But anyway, that is the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, the OG German Expressionist film. I don't know exactly when I will be back. It will depend on whether other people have done their homework or not, as always. But I will bring more films. If you would like me to talk about not just silent film, I have been watching a bunch of Billy Wilder films, so if you would like me to talk about some of those, or, you know, some other more modern, let's say mid-20th century films, let me know, because I had been really enjoying watching the Billy Wilder films. I watched them while I had my other set of wisdom teeth out. So if you would like me to talk about any of those or anything, I won't say anything in particular because I only watch what I watch. I'm a bit stubborn like that. But if you would like me to expand out beyond sort of silent films, just ask. Let me know. Because I like talking about film. I like talking about books. And I'm only too happy to oblige about some of those things. Anyway, until we meet again, auf Wiedersehen. If you would like to support this channel, come across to the Black Cockie Press website, www.blackcockiepress.com.au, where you will find books and other writing services to help with your writing.